I am at the piazza of the British Library where the JLF is being held. And with me today is Sanjoy Roy, one of the directors of this festival. Hi Sanjoy.
Hi, absolutely delighted to see you all again and to be on the show.
Thank you so much. Now, Sanjoy, I'm going to ask you to assume that nobody knows what the JLF is, how long it's been going on, how many festivals have you had. Would you like to tell us about it?
Sure. So the Jaipur Literature Festival, which is the mothership, started 17 or 18 years ago. And it started in many ways, from the Edinburgh Festival, because we used to do a lot of work in Edinburgh in the early 2000s. And John and Faith Singh from Anoki came out there to see how built heritage plays such a vital role in the arts in Edinburgh, and all of these old buildings being used, for shows. And they said, why can't we do something similar back in Jaipur and create value for built heritage? So that's how it started, not the Jaipur Literature Festival.
So that was the reason why Jaipur was chosen, because of the old heritage around it.
Absolutely, because buildings were being torn down, old Havelis and palaces and forts were being torn down for new malls and what you talk about in terms of today's century. And they were very keen that this stops happening. So they asked us to come and help them set up a heritage festival, which we advised them to set up. We didn't run it. And then after a while, because that sort of started going pretty much pear-shaped, they said, you have to come and rescue your baby. At which point of time, there was a literature program that Namita and William were programming into this larger festival. So we took that and took that out of the main festival, and we set up what is now known as the Jaipur Literature Festival, running for 17, 18 years. And then 10 years ago, we set up JLF London as our first international extension. And it was really with Jude Kelly. Jude was impassioned about us coming to the South Bank for some time. And she said, come to the South Bank. You need to be in the heart of the arts world. And we all acknowledge that this is the heart of the arts world. And about 7 years ago, in a conversation over a gin and tonic.
Oh, wonderful.
With Rowley, who is the director of the British Library, we agreed that we would move to this, our new home, and a much easier place and a much better fit.
Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Edinburgh Festival. The one thing which is said about the Edinburgh Festival, that it has an entire ecosystem around it, and that it seems to generate enormous funds and enormous tourism. So do you think the JLF has been able to create that environment in India or abroad?
Well, certainly in India. I mean, the last survey that we did about 7 or 8 years ago, of course, that's pre-COVID, the value that was ascribed to us for the 6-day festival that happens in Jaipur, with about 500,000 people who come in, 11% of those are international travelers.
Sorry to interrupt you. Are these physical presence
physical,
that you're talking,
I'm talking
or
about
digital?
Physical. No, our digital presence is about 22 million. So the physical presence is about 500,000, or used to be 500,000. And the contribution then was pegged at about 115 crores, which is about 11.5 million pounds, or an equivalent.
Yeah, but so that's this next related question. I mean, arranging the funds for it, the sponsorships, has it been a challenge? Or have you been
Of course it's a challenge. I think, raising any money for the arts, including in the Edinburgh Festival, is a challenge. If you look at the Festival Fringe, for example, every group that comes to the Festival Fringe really struggles. It's not that the Book Festival and the International Festival don't, but they're able to raise money through ticketing and through other sponsors. We continue to have a problem for various reasons. One is that literature is not necessarily cricket. Literature is not necessarily Bollywood. But of course, now that we drive such large numbers, of course, it's relatively easier for us to be able to access money. But again, the sensibility today in terms of what's the color of money is not necessarily a sensibility that we ascribe to. We said, what is the color of money? Does money have color? But there have been occasions, in fact, even in the UK, where in the past, people have come to protest one or the other sponsor. And, at Southall, they came with buckets of red paint, which they splashed across the forecourt, etc. So these are some of the things that we have to be very conscious about, because people do look at us as a very very powerful sort of arts entity, and therefore everybody feels that they too identify with it, if not own it, and that's what we set out to do.
Yeah, I totally understand this, because I think in a number of so-called public events, who the sponsor it becomes really very important. I mean, I've seen this in the social sector, for example. If you try to do something and you have any of the, if I can say so, liquor or cigarette companies sponsoring you, it's just a big no-no. Nobody likes it, and there are huge protests. You must be talking about something like that. So,
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, we do so much on environment. As we speak, there are 3 sessions going on environment, for example. And when you look at environment and look at some of the organizations who are happy to give you money, but they have a different
they want visibility.
way of handling the environment,
Yeah.
those become problematic.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is, what is the difference that you found between running the JLF in India and running it in London? For example, I mean, I'm hearing people say that there are fewer footfalls this year. I'm no one to comment on it, but I would ask you to tell me, has it been more difficult to get people in?
Not at all. Health and safety in the UK is obviously a concern, and the reason we stopped selling tickets a few days ago, because it was sold out, is there was a fire last year that we had at the Knowledge Centre, and so the British Library is very conscious about health and safety. So we weren't able to, open the box office in the way that we do, say, in India, where there's a flexibility.
Yes.
In a 10,000 seater hall at the front lawn, we can accommodate 17,000.
I know, people can sit on the floor, it
It's a
doesn't
question
matter.
of adjusting, but here we can't, which is the reason you're seeing less people,
Yeah.
because we haven't been able to.
But does it affect your finances or?
It doesn't really, because of course, while we have stuff on the ground, we also have stuff online, and our online presence is, of course, formidable. And as we speak, for the first week, our online presence from the British Library that's going out live is ticketed,
Right.
which you typically
Oh, is
don't
that
get.
so? That's
Yes,
that's
for
a
the
good
first
innovation.
week, so that we make that a sort of, you can
A
give-
money spinning.
Nothing is money spinning. A 10 quid is not going to get us.
No, but
very
that was
far.
my second question. With physical presence becoming increasingly difficult post-COVID, and a lot of people feeling, who wants to go through the tubes and the buses and this, that, the other to reach a place, much easier to tune in. And I'm glad you've ticketed it, because that way you ensure that people.
Sure, but
there's no free
this
riders.
exchange of energy, which is physical, is not something that you can replicate online, however brilliantly it may be filmed.
Yeah.
Similarly, back home in India, we're seeing the crowds just coming back. We were in Spain, which was our first year JLF Spain. There were thousands of people who turned up. So it's really, again, Spain doesn't necessarily look at health and safety in the same way that the
But
UK
did you
does.
have a language problem in Spain?
We did simultaneous translation.
Oh, that's
so you just put your earphone on, and typically in every panel we had at least one Spanish speaker and one speaker who spoke in English, irrespective of where they came from. But that made it much more easier and accessible.
Yeah. So do you see this festival remaining physical and digital at the same
Totally,
time?
there's no question of it not being physical, because
Yeah.
this is where you get writers to come together. So it's not just the conversations you have on stage, but it's the conversations that you have outside of the stage. It's the conversations that two people have at the end of a session. Those are the things that you can't really do when you
When
get
you're
online,
online.
because you then click off, and who are you discussing what you've just heard or what you've just engaged with? Much of the excitement of a live event is the other,
Yeah.
is the conversations that go beyond.
That go beyond. No, that's absolutely correct. Now, the thing that I'm trying to say here is how do you select who to invite? Because, I mean, we did talk about controversies around funding, but there has been a few questions being raised about same kind of people being invited again and again, or people who are better known publicly. I understand why one would do that, because they do attract the footfalls. But are you encouraging younger writers, people who...
We don't have to worry about footfall in any part of the world. Certainly not in Jaipur, not in America, and not here. So we have the luxury of inviting people who you wouldn't otherwise have listened to earlier. It's not that Marcus de Sotoy would be invited to many festivals because he's a mathematician, or a Vahuni, because she represents a particular kind of writing. Yes, where we re-invite people is when they have a new piece of work. So
Right.
Shashi Tharoor has come back because he's got the new B.R. Ambedkar's book. So we don't have an issue about the work per se, or what you represent. We try and ensure that you have a perspective of the same issue from across the left and right and center sort of political divide. And it's for the audiences to take away with them what they wish to from these conversations.
Has there been a good connect between publishers and writers? Because in one of the sessions which I attended yesterday, a number of women of color had raised this issue that particularly in the UK and US or the Western countries, people of color, and particularly they were talking about women of color, are finding it very difficult to get published. Does a festival like this help them to connect with publishers?
So we're not a publisher-driven festival, so we're not a book fair.
Yeah.
But what we do have is the Jaipur Bookmark. The Jaipur Bookmark happens at the back of the Jaipur Literature Festival and of some of the JLFs, not all, not in London, for example, which is where we bring publishers, rights agents, writers, and translators together. Jaipur Bookmark's focus is on translation and on rights, and to ensure that languages across India, languages across Europe, and all of the other languages find a way to be expressed. And our whole effort for the last 10 years is, can we improve the quality of translation? So much of our effort is gone into that, and as we can see now, the quality of translation that is coming out is better and better year on year. You know, you have the Arunava Sinhas of the world, or the Rakshanda Jalils, who've really done some brilliant translations. And that's then resulting in places like Gitanjali Shree's The Tomb of Sang or Rate Samadhi going on to win the Booker. That, I think, is really the success of some of the stuff that we've done in the past.
So one would say in that sense that the JLF has actually contributed towards having those voices being heard which would otherwise not be heard, at least from the subcontinent.
You know, I think the most important contribution that we've made, and not necessarily the Jaipur Literature Festival, but the fact that 300 odd festivals have taken some kind of inspiration from what we've done, and all the way from the Bay Area festival in Berkeley all the way through to Bali and Indonesia, and across the 180 festivals in the subcontinent, all have sort of come out. Our aim is that can we encourage every city, every town, every village, every major place to have a festival where they can then position local writing, new authors, young people who otherwise may not get access. And by giving them that platform, you're actually improving the relationship between readers and writers.
So would you say that is the greatest contribution of
Absolutely.
JLF?
And the fact that, at least in India, we started out with a focus on young people.
Yeah.
80% of our audiences is below the age of 27.
Wow.
And that for us, unlike, say, for example, here, there are some young people who roll up. But that's our focus in India. How do we make considered information accessible? How do we make it sexy? We're very happy that they come for the pizza or the selfie or date night.
Yeah.
But as long as they stumble upon an idea and go back enriched
Or
and go back,
stimulated.
with a sense of, yes, I can do it too. I can create an innovation, write a book, tell a story.
Yeah.
Because we all have stories in our DNA.
Yeah.
It's really about realizing them.
Do you have a story in your DNA?
Well, I have 3 commissions which I have been plodding away at. The thing is, I prefer reading. I love reading. I don't watch any television, and I do a lot of homework reading because of some of the programming that happens. So yes, so it's slow going.
Okay.
And I sometimes envy writers who sort of roll it off.
It's
but
hard work.
It's hard work.
Where do you see the future of the JLF or any literary festival, like we say? Of course, you did mention that physical presence stimulates and excites people and you're happy to meet people. But nevertheless, I find an enormous inertia in people. They'd much rather do it online. They don't want to go to the shops. So where is the future of the JLF in the next 5 years?
What COVID taught us was a very important lesson. It wasn't that we were not online pre-COVID. Everything that we do across our festivals, 33 odd festivals that we run across the world, including the 9 JLFs, we put everything online. But what COVID taught us is that we need to do it in a far more focused way. So 4th of April in 2020, we went online. This is post the lockdown on 23rd of March. And we were doing it from our homes with no idea of who was watching, etc. But we were putting out 6 episodes of JLF's Brave New World out every week. And by the end of the first season, we realized over 4.5 million people had viewed it. In 2022, when we went online, or 2021, I can't remember, we had 27 million people watching us online. This year, our whole focus is, can we increase the amount of time people spend watching a session. And we were very keen to try and cross the 10-minute mark as an average. And we've achieved now 10 minutes 48 seconds. So yes, online is absolutely a way forward, and we were able to, in that first 2020 period, raise about $1 million odd in terms of revenues online to be able to help what we were doing. Sure, it didn't make an impact on us because we are a medium-sized company with 100 people, so we have a whatever. But looking into the future, I truly feel that despite the fact that you have all of the restrictions, you have cancel culture, you have the politics of hatred, you have the politics of division, you have all of the segregation that continues to happen, and the inequity, literature, knowledge, festival, and the arts is here to stay. It's been, people have predicted its demise forever. Theatre is dead, literature is dead, the arts is dead.
Films are dead.
But it's not, because each one of us are impassioned about it. When you have a story to tell, you will tell it. When you have a story to write, you will write it. And are there audiences out there? I totally agree. Look at the bookshop here. In the first
they're sold
years,
out. I went looking for a book and I couldn't
sold
get
out
it.
to every, and this is despite the fact that this year they brought in twice the number of books that they had last year. Even then, they sold out. You try and getting into the bigger theatre right now, you won't. So I think there's a great hunger for considered information and knowledge as opposed to WhatsApp information and knowledge. And the arts is something that you do because you're impassioned about it, and more and more people are realizing, and we've been advocating, that there is no difference between the arts and the sciences, and you need both to be able to think outside of the box, be innovative, and perhaps survive what is going to face all of us, which is climate emergency.
Also, do you think that the British audience and the British people are also responding in the same way as the Indians are?
Way beyond, because audiences here choose to come out, right? And as you said, not everybody is happy to take the tube or take a bus.
On a day like this, it's very hot on the tube.
So you have to make that commitment, and here there is that commitment because they buy a ticket and they get here. So they make that commitment. In India, they roll up, assuming that they can, find a space or have a pizza or wander through or take a selfie, which is fine. So it's both, and for us it's irrelevant as long as even one person walks into a session and walks out with a new idea.
How many countries have you taken the JLF to? And are you planning to go beyond the number of countries that you already are in?
So as you know, this is the 10th JLF and the first international edition that we've done anywhere in the world. We have 4 in North America, which is Boulder, Colorado, Houston, New York, and Toronto. We will be adding 2 more this year, which is the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and one in the city of Niagara in Canada. We also have Adelaide in Australia. We have Doha in the Middle East. We now have JLF Spain, which we started anew. We have the one in Maldives at Soneva Fushi. And yes, we will be adding, today a number of cities write into us with a bid saying that would you like to bring JLF to us? For example, Belfast, when they first did the bid and they came to us 5 years in a row, I was into why would anybody want to go to Belfast?
It depends on how large the Indian audience is.
It's not about the Indian audience, because in most places in Spain, for example, there is no Indian audience, so it's not for them. We don't cater to the diaspora. We cater to the largest arts-going population in that part of the world. Boulder is 99.2% white American audiences because there's no people of color in Boulder, Colorado, which is a very white town. But in Belfast, for example, when Roisin Doreen said, I said, why can't you take one of the British festivals? There's Hay, there's Edinburgh, there's Cheltenham, there's whatever. And they said, well, if we did, only half the audience would show up in Belfast. And that for us was a huge reason for us to go to Belfast. In Boulder, the then mayor told me, he said, if we don't understand how to be able to navigate diversity in this very white town, we as a town will die, and you all represent diversity. So we continue to get, we've got bids from all sorts of places, from Austria, from Luxembourg, from Amsterdam. We will be opening at least one more in the north of Europe in the coming years, and we'll continue to see if we can open one in Italy.
Sanjoy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Always a pleasure to do this annually. Always a pleasure to be. And thank you all for being so supportive to JLF.
And looking forward to seeing you again next year.
Totally. Thank you.
Bye-bye.